I'm Psycho Sorcerer. Today we're going to talk about what everybody thinks about first whenever you talk about real magic, and that's spell casting. Spell casting is not the only form of magic, but it's the one that most people look to learn when they first get involved with this thing, so let's get into it. You're going to find in different occult bookstores or in different metaphysical studies areas all these books that tell you how to do spells. Usually what these books will tell you is specific rites and rituals, how many candles to use, what time of day to do something, what words to say, that sort of thing. All of that is helpful for one step in spellcasting, but it's only one of the 5 steps of spellcasting, and if you're not using the other 4, that spell is not going to work. So I don't know why it's so hard to find good sources on the actual methodology of spellcasting, but without it, it's going to be hard to get things to work. You're going to have to stumble on the 5 steps on your own. I would rather make this something that everybody can just use and learn right here. Another important thing to understand is that all of those spells that you read in those books are unnecessary. You can create your own spells for the step that those fulfill, but a lot of times using a book or using someone else's spells that they've created gives you a sense of doing something otherworldly, and that sense helps to ignite the right emotions within you needed to do spellcasting. So don't discard all of those spells, but understand that doing them exactly as specified is not as important as feeling as if you're doing them exactly as specified. And we'll get into that in a moment. Before we go into the method of spellcasting, it's important that we understand something you see in metaphysical studies all the time. It's called the masculine and feminine principle. Most people get confused on this. They think masculine and feminine represent the male and female, as in men and women. That's not actually what it's talking about. The words masculine and feminine are used because the traits in the old days when those terms were chosen that related more primarily to men and women matched up with what they were looking for. It's not so true today. Masculine energy is energy that penetrates. It's energy that forces itself into the world. It's what we would call will. Feminine energy is energy that accepts. It's energy that takes other energy into itself and amplifies it, produces it. The reason masculine and feminine is the best terminology people use for it is related to sex. The masculine penetrates and injects its will into the feminine, which then produces or gives birth to results. So when we talk about masculine and feminine, that's what we're talking about. A lot of times it's easier to think about these things in the modern age as the conscious and the subconscious because we understand those terms now, though they weren't so readily understood in the past. The conscious mind is the mind that can project our thoughts out. We can think about whatever we want. We can decide what we want to do, these sorts of things. The subconscious mind handles everything in the background. We don't really act upon it usually, and it just does its thing. It accepts input from the conscious mind and does what it needs to do to make that happen. And that's actually everything you need in order to do spellcasting. Spellcasting is actually controlling what your conscious mind projects into your subconscious mind so that the results within the self and within the outside world are controlled by the user. So there are 5 steps to spellcasting. I've lined them out. These are my own thing. The sources for this particular video I'm going to put at the end because I've taken a lot of liberties here with some of my own experiences, and it's hard to track what books some of this came from. It's also hard to find books that specifically lay this out, whereas reading over a large number of them, you just start to uncover these steps. So step 1 in the process is to decide what you want. So you obviously want an outcome. A lot of times in early spellcasting, it's best to change something about yourself. Let's say you want to be happier, or you want to be less afraid all the time, or you want to be more wealthy. You want something to change within your own life. Usually something about your personality is the easiest thing to start with. The first thing to do is to decide 100% you want that change. You have to have no doubt in your mind that that is what you want, no matter what the consequence. Once you've decided that, you go through a process of figuring out what ritual you're going to do, designing the ritual, and that sort of thing. That process is all still part of the decision process. Once you've decided on a ritual and you've decided on what exactly you want, you move on to step 2, experience. You have to bring about a level of emotion within yourself, as if what you want has already occurred. That experience has to feel like a very strong emotion. And that emotion is actually what jumpstarts your magic. Without that emotion, it's not going to work. So here's where we start to see the conscious and subconscious mind working together. The conscious mind makes a decision firmly and goes through logical left brain steps to come up with a ritual or to find the correct ritual if you're going to pull it out of a book. The right mind, or the subconscious mind, accepts the decision and tries to envision it emotionally. It feels, it perceives, it just experiences it for you. And if you can get these two to work in tandem to that step, you're ready for step number 3. Step number 3 is to take action. This is where you perform the ritual. You need to do this emotionally and logically. These two parts of your brain need to be in tandem throughout this entire process from here forward. You need to be able to express everything in your desire as strongly as possible, as much as if it's happening. At the same time, you need to follow these steps logically and methodically. Doing this is difficult, it takes a lot of practice, but if you do it right, your spells are going to work. By the end of this step, you should be exhausted. If you're casting spells and it's just like reading something off a page and you're done, you're not doing it right. You have to really go into this. You're going to feel exhausted, but you're going to feel like you've just finished a workout. Moving on to step 4 is the hardest step for most people. It's called concealment. After you finish the ritual, you have to let it go. How to do this? You're going to have to figure that out for yourself. Everyone has their own methods that they eventually get down. It takes a lot of practice. So you've done step 1. You decided what you want. You've done step 2. You've experienced it as if it's happened. You've done step 3. You've performed action, proving to the universe that you are willing to go to lengths to make this happen. And then in step 4, you have to accept that it will happen and let it go. Letting it go means not dwelling on it, not thinking about it, not constantly acting upon it. That said, you still have to be ready for whenever it comes your way. That brings us to step 5, which is manifestation. In order to actually manifest what it is that you want, you have to accept it when it comes to you. So you've sent your will out into the cosmos, essentially, and the cosmos is now acting as a means of giving it back to you. In the case of doing something just to change your own personality, you don't even need to look at it as going out. You're simply pushing upon your subconscious a conscious desire and letting your subconscious make that a part of you. Once you've done this, letting it go allows it to happen. If you continue to dwell on it, it's never going to occur. It's like saying, I want to be rich someday. Well, you're never going to be rich if you want to be rich someday. If instead you say, I'm going to be rich, and then you just make it happen, that's how you do it. Your own thinking that someday something will happen is what's going to cause it to not happen right now. The final step of manifestation requires that you allow what you asked for to come to pass. This is very, very difficult as well, because since you've just forgotten about the ritual as best as you can in the previous step, you may not be consciously looking for it, but subconsciously you are. All of a sudden, opportunities are going to show up which will bring you to exactly what you were looking for in your life. Now, spellcasting is not like some kind of a magic game or Dungeons and Dragons. You're not going to shoot lightning out of your hands and breathe fire, but you are going to be able to pull things into your life, like wealth, love, changing people's minds, abilities that are more mental, more subtle than anyone would ever really notice, but that are going to allow you to basically stack the deck of fate in your favor. The whole point of spellcasting is changing your fate to what you want as opposed to letting the universe decide for you. And technically, we all do this every day. You look at self-help gurus and you'll see, they'll say, visualize what you want, decide on it, meditate on it every day, or affirm it every day, do some kind of ritual, and then let it go and accept it, live like you're already that person, and then let it come to be. It's the exact same steps. They're actually teaching you how to do magic, they just aren't thinking about it as something that you can do outside of the self. Now, magic within the self is easier than outside of the self. You have no outside forces working against you, but doing it outside works the same way as long as you have enough practice and will. We'll talk about the different methods for getting into the right states for this in other videos. A lot of meditation helps, the right breathing, finding that right emotional state. Once you've done this successfully once or twice, you're going to start to notice that there's a specific emotion that shows up when it's working. And that emotion is not one of the emotions that you can normally describe. It's not joy, it's not fear, it's something else. It feels amazing. But when you feel it, you know it's working. It's the feeling of magic. I know that sounds cheesy, but that's how it is. Next time, we'll try to delve into some of these techniques to help you get your spellcasting to work. But remember that this lesson here is the most important thing as far as getting the spells to work for you. No matter what ritual you choose to do in step 3, doing the other steps is the only way to get your magic to succeed. See you next time.